Just open that. Copy.
A dogfight can be over in the blink of an eye. The pilots record the action as seen through the heads-up display. After the flights, the videotapes are reviewed. That's when the kills are validated and the tactics are evaluated. Here, Caesar explains what happened on his mission.
Okay, what we're looking at here is I'm approximately 50 degrees nose low, inverted, and I think one of the interesting things about BFM is you know, we're pretty much people, horizon's good, level's good, you're driving your car. Once you're in a fight, you have no idea which way is up. You get fleeting glimpses of the ground, the sky. I had no idea which way I was heading. I knew my altitude, I knew I was 50 degrees nose low, and I knew where the hard deck was, i.e. our minimum altitude. Now in combat, our minimum altitude would be the ground. But that's a little dangerous to train to. And in this case, our minimum altitude is 8,000 feet because of the floor of our operating area. But I know I've got plenty of altitude, and I'm pushing them around offensively here that I feel like I can do anything I need to do. And here I am inverted, coming through 50 degrees nose low. I've got G right here. I'm under 3.2 Gs. Apologize for the quality of that. And I've got my time in here, which is good for reconstruction purposes. And I'm at 2,100 feet of range and 240 knots velocity, or V sub C, we call it, closure. In this instance, I don't have a radar lock on a Mig-29 with guns selected, and this is our funnel. The radar's not getting a lock, but the funnel means that bullets, if I pull the trigger, are coming out, and as I transcribe through the sky, through that arc, the bullets are going down through there. And if I do pull the trigger with a radar lock, it switches from the funnel to the director mode. I've got a TD box, target designator box, that says, hey, the target's in there. Actually, it's a little bit lagging right there. And this is where my pipper is right now. If I pull the trigger, that's where the bullets will go. So my job is to maneuver this out in front of him along his flight path and just rake him over the coals. So we're working those low here.
Let's go. Trigger down.
Okay, right there was one fleeting. It's a radar lock, but it's a snapshot. What we mean snapshot, I mean it is instantaneous, quick shot. It's a valid snapshot from the aspect is I'm pulling the trigger a little early here, but I'm seeing his flight path coming this way. I'm trying to bring the director reticle down and to intersect his flight path. So if you watch closely, there's the event marker. The trigger's down, I'm spraying bullets in front of him, and right there. Not a great shot, but I did take out about 3 or 4 feet of his left wing tip. Will that affect him? Yeah, I think so. But I'm just spraying bullets downrange here. Again, the fangs are out. I'm really, you know, it's a MiG-29, it's a Fulcrum, and here I am fighting them. And I'm not really disciplined on my trigger. Don't have a ton of bullets, 578 bullets in this case. These are all simulated here. But you don't want to be sitting here hosing bullets on downrange. We shoot at 4,000 rounds per minute, 4,000 to 6,000 rounds per minute, and that'll go really quickly. So there he is. Yeah, I've just gunned him once, so he's half dead in this case. We continue. Here comes the fight. You can see now what he's doing. He initially tried to defeat my gunshot, and we're only about 1,300 feet apart, and he's just trying to get above me and pull into me. And what might cause is an in-close overshoot, and what happens there? Boom, shalem, low call. Here comes the archer. I'm dead. And that's a BFM error. I think what I do here is I unload slightly, let him translate up and to the right to the horizon, get some energy back, and follow him back on up. And this right here is what makes it all worth it. You know, to be able to come back from the deck and have a pipper right on the cockpit with the trigger down, and this guy pretty much blowing up right in front of you makes it that worth it. I could go home now. You know, it's only been 3 days.
Few American pilots have trained against the MiG-29, and even fewer have faced it in real combat. Its reputation as a deadly adversary is legendary, and for nearly all the pilots of Red October, this exercise is their first chance to see the Fulcrum up close.
Here we're standing in front of the MiG-29, the German version of the MiG-29. The German Air Force got these aircraft in 1990, right after unification. The East German forces had 24 of these jets, and the West German Air Force, of course, took over all of those aircraft. It was a very, very interesting aircraft to German Air Force and to NATO in general, because it was the first Russian aircraft that had the maneuverability to counter the modern NATO jets, and it had a new radar, a pulse Doppler radar, that was capable of detecting low-flying aircraft.
When the MiG-29 first appeared, its radar was reputed to be equal, if not superior, to the Hornets. The Luftwaffe MiGs dispelled that rumor to the great relief of the West, but the Fulcrum proved to have a few tricks up its sleeve. Most fearsome for the Hornet pilots is the MiG's helmet-mounted sight, a retractable reticle with a heads-up display for the Archer infrared missile. The F-18 has nothing comparable. An American has to point the nose of the Hornet at the opponent to achieve missile lock. But in the MiG, the pilot merely turns his head. For the Americans, the Schlem radio call means the end.
Northern Hornet is dead. The Northern Hornet is dead. Copy, kill is too late.
If you take a closer look at the aircraft, we find the cannon, which is right here. It's a very big cannon. It's a 30mm cannon. And right in front of the aircraft, we can take a look at the ammunition. This would be the typical load of the gun. It's 150 rounds. When you compare it to the Hornet carries a couple hundred, but these rounds are a lot bigger. So if you need just one of these rounds to blow up a Hornet, while a Hornet would need several rounds to blow up a MiG-29. The gun is still a very valuable weapon in the dogfighting today. It's the only weapon that you cannot jam or decoy with other decoys.
While the Hornet may have superior slow-speed maneuverability, the Americans are dazzled by the Fulcrum pilot's final surprise.
In the very back of the aircraft, we have two very powerful engines. And a very important aspect in dogfighting is to have a lot of thrust. It is best to have more thrust than the aircraft weighs. So we're talking about a thrust-to-weight ratio bigger than 1, which would theoretically allow the aircraft to climb straight up, like you've probably seen before. And this helps us to keep up the speed when we're flying tight turns, fighting, for example, a Hornet. And that way we have a very, very slight advantage over most of our opponents. Being a fighter, the aircraft, of course, needs something to shoot. We not only just want to fly around, our task is to shoot down other aircraft. And therefore, we have not only the gun, but also missiles. And here we have an older infrared version. It has an infrared seeker head, which is looking for heat sources, mainly for the engine exhaust, which is normally very high temperature. So this seeker head will lock onto the exhaust of the target aircraft and then steer itself toward the aircraft. It's a so-called fire and forget missile. The second missile we have is the so-called Archer. It's also an infrared missile. It's a fire and forget missile also. So it will lock onto the heat source of the enemy target, of the enemy aircraft. And this is the missile that makes the MiG-29 so dangerous in close-in dogfights. Whenever we get close with other fighters, we have a big advantage due to this missile, because the seeker head can look very far to the sides and lock up targets where other missiles would not be able to do this.
The MiG-29 also carries a radar missile. It tracks targets similarly to the Hornet's AMRAAM, but with far less range.
Out at range, we had a very big disadvantage and have to think of crazy tactics to get close to the Hornets and then use our superiority with the short-range weapons we have and the maneuverability.
In contrast to the physically demanding MiG, the F-18 is flown on STEM power, as in brainstem. It means being able to pilot the Hornet the same way they're able to breathe or walk, without having to think about it. They have the advantage of technology, fly-by-wire controls, and the glass cockpit, where computer-driven displays have replaced dozens of steam gauges.
You may hear that the issue of speed in a fighter jet is incredibly important in order to get somewhere, and that is true. But the best thing about the Hornet is its slow speed handling characteristics. It's very forgiving, it's very dynamic. You can get slower, faster than any other airplane. What that allows me to do, though, is to point my nose at the bad guy and take him out with a missile or a gun.
The intentionally unstable design of the modern fighter jet allows the superb performance and maneuverability of the Hornet. Computerized flight controls keep the jet in the air, but they aren't lightning-fast supercomputers. They are comparable to early 1980s era desktops. albeit ones that can withstand 7.5 G turns, hundreds of carrier landings, and still never freeze up.
Back here, probably one of the keys to the Hornet performance besides the leading edge and trailing edge flaps is the stab. It's an all-moving stabilator, differential as well, helps with roll control and pitch authority. The F-18 Hornet has probably the best pitch rate of any aircraft out there. So much so that you could almost gray yourself out or black out under the commanded G-forces if you're at a high enough airspeed.
A classic dogfight requires a close-range weapon, the 20mm M61 Vulcan cannon. But beyond visual range, the Hornet, with its advanced radar capability, is superior to the MiG. An AMRAAM can be launched at an opponent many miles away, well before either pilot could make a visual identification.
We've got 9 stations on the aircraft, 2 on the wing, 1 on the center line, 2 on each cheek, and then the wingtip stations. These gentlemen and lady are about to download an AIM-9 CATM, a captive air training missile from Aircraft Station 9.
In Red October, the AIM-9s won't be real. The computer will simulate these short-range Sidewinder's capabilities when the pilot pulls the trigger and calls Fox 2 on the radio.
Besides actually carrying weapons, probably the most important station on a Hornet is the left cheek station. Left cheek station, while we're in combat, about 99% of the time carries a FLIR pod. That FLIR pod is paramount for getting battle damage assessment, for lasing for targets, acquiring targets, responding to tasking, and it is not loaded on our RAG jets, but every fleet bird that goes out on deployment will have one of those, and that is our bread and butter. So taking off from the carrier, landing on the carrier makes you a cool Navy pilot. Having your FLIR allows you to get the BHA to actually employ as we're told to do, and allow you to use those smart weapons.